And now I'm going to say good morning, one and all. And we have some exciting, yet more information to share with you today. I was on the call. Is anybody with me?
Yeah,
Juliana was with me, with Joanna Watkins, our head of legal counsel for Florida Realtors on Monday, listening to how to use the two newest, latest and greatest of the forms. The key is, guys, we're in a period of change, and I'm just going to say, get used to it because it's not stopping. There's going to be more changes. Changes are, I just think, part of our life right now. I don't think they're going to change.
roll with the punches.
That's right. Listen, get ready, get used to it, start going into the gym or whatever, because that's really what's going to continue to happen. And that's okay, right? Because the idea is we put something out, we realize it's clunky, it's got issues, and then we got to change it. That's really what's happening. So there's going to be more changes. They're going to be changing some more of the contracts. They're going to be adding in October 1st, just so you know, I'm just going to put it out there. We all know with me, if you've been with me for any length of time, what is October, guys? Sad. Halloween. It's so true, Juliana. But with me, it's business planning month begins. And I say begins because I have a large team, as you guys know, and I can't possibly see all of you in October. That would be a crazy feat. So it begins, and so it will begin. I've been on a task force with Budge and Jill and Aaron, a couple other brokers, and we've been going through our previous business plans and some other business plans, and we're trying to come up with some new stuff because we feel that with what's going on in the market, we want to bring some new stuff to you. So we've got some great stuff that we're keeping. We're adding some new stuff. So on the first Thursday of October, don't ask me what day that is. I'm going to guess it's the 3rd, but I could be wrong. We will be having our sales meeting, but it will be not just a sales meeting. It really will be the introduction to our business planning. So get ready. It's going to be fun. But guess what also happens in the beginning of October? The introduction of another new required form. Yay! What form is that? Does anybody know? So sad, guys. It is the form that is going to be required for flooding. So if you are in a flood zone, if you've ever had a claim having anything to do with flooding, you have to disclose that in writing. What? Carrie, didn't you always have to disclose that? You actually did, but now there's a form for it. So yes, that is a new thing coming out. October 1st, it's required. So we will be talking about that fun thing as well. So there's always new fun things on the horizon. Isn't that great? That's what's so fun. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It's required for every property, no matter the type of property, no matter where it is. It's required in the state of Florida. So Keith said, what about on current listings? Thank you for asking. Excellent question. Yes, we're going to need to go ahead. If you have a current listing, you'll need to get that requirement. So as of October 1, now, Carrie, what about, can we be proactive and get it today? Wouldn't that be great? No, we don't have the forms. Surprise. Because we like to keep you on your toes. So we're going to get the form to you probably the week of. What do you think, Juliana?
I mean, it'll be ready the day they say that it's ready.
Yeah, so we don't know. It's like a game. We like to gamify things for everybody, make sure you know what's going on. So we will get it to you absolutely before you need it. Could be the day before, but it will be before you need it. And I will get it to you guys. So fear not, you will have it. However, that is what's coming, just so you know.
And
Yes.
the update to the sales contract,
Well, the update to the sales contract, we do not have yet either.
but it's a warning.
But yes, the update to the sales contract. Will they be changing the listing contract again? There are words of that. Do we know? Oh, I mean, so guys, my point is, there's new things are coming, new things afoot. There is a talk of another addenda that will go with the document stating how things will be paid. I mean, we don't know. I know that's what Joanna Watkins said. There will be another document that states that will go to the title company on how things are being handled. Do we have that one yet? No, but I know that addendum will be coming. I'm looking forward to that addendum, actually. So long story short, get ready for more documents because they're being made right now. So that's what's coming. But we will keep you informed every step of the way, so no worries. And again, the idea with the forms are to make your life easier, to make this a smoother transition, because the number one thing that we know is that there's a lot of confusion, right? Would you guys all agree with that? And the confusion is making people a little angsty. Have you guys noticed a little angst, right? And with angst comes, some people handle, I think, angst a little better than others. But what I'm really finding is people don't understand how this is affecting the code of ethics. That's probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing, right? How does this affect the code of ethics? And people keep trying to school us. Have you been finding that advisors, well, not really, agents on the other side are trying to school you on how to be using the commission and what is in your listing agreement? I love when they ask us that. It's none of their business. So before we jump into forms, I want to share something that Joanna, my favorite slide actually from the meeting. And if you guys have questions, feel free to jump in, but I'm going to share a slide right now. This is my favorite slide. And if anybody wants a copy of this, please ask. I will be happy to text it to you. This was the question. Does the standard of practice 16.16 prohibit the negotiation of the buyer broker compensation in a buyer's purchase offer? Because so many agents are saying, what? You told me they were offering compensation when I called you. Juliana, is your seller offering compensation?
Yes,
How much is the offering?
enough.
But let's say you give me a number.
2.5 coconuts.
2.5 coconuts. Great. I put in my offer 100,000 less, and now you're saying he'll only pay how many coconuts?
2.5.
No, less.
1.5.
1.5 coconuts. What?
It's like,
Oh, so he's saying 1.5 coconuts. You can't do that. What does your contract say? What does your listing agreement say? This is what we're hearing. Guys, it refers directly to this. The standard of practice states, no, a buyer can always ask their buyer broker to make a term of an offer to the purchase that the seller can pay a certain compensation to the buyer broker agreement. The standard of practice prohibits the realtor from attempting to modify the terms of the listing agreement through the terms of the offer, because the listing agreement is contractual matter between the seller and the listing broker. Okay, it has nothing to do with the buyer broker. However, the seller and the listing broker may independently choose to amend their listing agreement, and they don't have to tell anybody about it, right? And they can take any action they deem appropriate based on the seller's negotiation with the buyer. But that is none of the business of the buyer's broker. Okay, the standard of practice also says it prohibits a realtor from delaying or withholding the delivery of a buyer's offer while attempting to negotiate a buyer broker compensation. Is Janet Allen on? Hold on. Let me take a stop share for a second. Do I have Janet Allen on this morning? Because Janet Allen,
I'm here.
Janet, can you share what has been going on with Golden Oak?
Oh, Nelly. Where do you want me to
What,
start?
Allen? Please share. Mhm.
So, basically, and let me put a video here, sorry. So it started with the buyer's agent reaching out and not even asking what if the seller was offering or what the figure was, but basically saying, I'll have an offer for you if your seller agrees to pay me 3% commission. And well, so we were trying to say, okay, we'll present the offer with that in writing, and we present it. And but he wanted to just have that agreement first prior to submitting the offer. Well, we finally received the offer the following day, probably towards lunchtime, and the offer had been signed by his clients the day before in the afternoon. So meanwhile, he's like going back and forth with us on the commission and nothing to do with the offer and terms and what did the seller want, or, what would benefit his buyers in the offer. It was always to do with the commission that he was going to be paid. And then the broker's agreement, and then he had an issue with that, and copying in his broker and that. And so by the end of it, once we received the offer, basically the sellers only had a few hours to respond, which ticked them off. And so that was just the start of it. But it just this entire transaction of going back and forth. It was never putting his buyers in the forefront or protecting them. It always came back down to, the seller concession towards the buyer's broker commission.
And can I ask what the price of the home is, Janet?
We had it listed for $8,699,000.
Didn't even worry about his buyer.
And mind you, when we said, what the other listings were paying prior to this whole switch and everything, the commission offered in the community was 2% by the other listings, and we try to be extremely competitive, and so we were offering 2.25, and we've kept it that way. And we shared that with him, but no, he's a 3% agent, and that's what he was gonna get. But even towards the end, well, okay, we've agreed on this price, but did you even discuss with your clients doing 200 or 25,000 more, but including that seller commission? And I'm just like, till the very end, trying to wriggle his way in there. And it was so we'll see on the closing statement what he actually came down to with his buyers, and if his buyers are going to pay the difference, or if he even have that agreement in the first place. So it was just it's been icky. It's been really, really just gross to see how another agent operates, and having to keep quiet so that you don't, jeopardize the deal.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenny. And she's been back and forth with me the whole time. He tried to say we were violating the code of ethics. I don't know what ethic we were violating. I'd like to know what that was, because he was violating Article 1. He was violating Article 1660. Yes.
So for those of you who don't know who I am online, hi, g'day. I'm also a fellow faculty instructor and have been for the entire 25 years I've been in the business. I've seen some stuff. I've also served on the professional standards ethics hearings for over 20 years. So what some of us knew this was going to do was to flush out and cull the herd, flush out these unprofessional fools and get them out of our way. This is an example of that I'm already seeing, because we've seen it on our side as well with other listings, and as we're coming over. Doesn't matter the price point. I think obviously the Sotheby's name holds its own, but for you to be able to show that that was not at all a factor for our side, it was clearly an issue for his side. And I would keep your head up high saying, we know that we did things the ethical and professional way that was in the best interest of our customer, no matter what, and let them bring you to an ethics hearing. I dare them. Let them.
Thank you, Juliana. No, we're not worried about the ethics hearing. Actually, I would dare them myself. Yeah, I know.
It's just the point being, these people that are continuously doing this, let them.
Lewis.
Well, I just had a question. I mean, I thought you're supposed to have an agreement with your buyer before you even go into negotiation as to what compensation you're getting. So that right there is like
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Lewis, because here comes another question. Who is it? I think you brought up one recently, Keith. I know I've gotten this question. Yeah, it was you. No, Chad, are you on? Chad going?
Yep.
Chad, you just asked me yesterday on your, can you share what happened just yesterday?
It was a very similar situation. It's on my $4.75 million listing, and the I shared the commission agreement with the buyer's agent, and it's for 2.5%. It actually said on it 2.5% at a full price offer, and in the notes that it would be negotiated based on the
That's
offer
right.
price. He submitted. He told me that he was submitting 3%. I said, well, my sellers are not going to agree to that because their offer was for $370,000 less, and including all the furnishings in the house. And
Not quite full price.
and he
No.
wanted 3%, which we only had it listed at 2.5 with full price. So he submitted that, and then he asked me, what my was it when we told him we would only give him 2% at that price. And so he came back and asked me, well, so let me get this straight, or is it 4% total? So he was wanting to know what my commission was. And so, just let him know it was negotiable, and that, we told him from the beginning that, it would be negotiated, and this is what they agreed to pay, and that's it. So it took a couple of days of back and forth, and I still haven't got the ratified contract, but he said he's signing off this morning. But the only thing that we changed from their offer to that, we accepted the price. We accepted the furnishings, other than we just countered back with the few things that they were going to take with them, the few pieces of furniture that they wanted, and we changed the closing date by a week. So that was it. Other than changing the commission by 1%, and it held it up for 2 days. And I know that was not the buyer, holding that up over the commission. It was the agent holding it up over the commission.
So Chad, after I told you what to say, coming back, stating that this is our offer, it's all negotiable, as we both know, and this is what we've agreed upon based on your price, did he come back and say something again?
No, he didn't.
Yeah,
I
so
didn't.
guys, we had another slimy slime. Thank you very much, Chad. Another slime bag with Emily. Is Emily on? She was the first of them. And this guy was, oh, my wife's a broker and blah, 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 wanting to know what's in our listing agreement. We had to go so far as to say, well, what's in your buyer broker agreement? They have no right. And again, I'm going to share my screen one more time because you guys really need to use this. And this is from Joanna Watkins. So you can simply say, I don't know if you were on with Joanna Watkins, but per Article 16.16, you are prohibited from attempting to modify our listing agreement. It's none of your damn business. Now, you're also going to get paid whatever's in your buyer broker agreement. So what are you worried about? Right? So if your seller's trying to save money on the purchase, then if your buyer's trying to save money on the purchase, that means they obviously want to pay it in the closing costs because they've agreed to pay you your fee. Okay, that's the story. Either they're going to pay you your fee and your closing costs, or they're going to pay it in their mortgage. It's going to come from somewhere, right, guys? Because it's going to be on the HUD one way or the other. So they can determine, the buyer, how they want to pay that. Do they want the seller to pay some of it, or do they want to pay some of it? But that's the buyer's decision. But it doesn't matter on the agent's side. The agent is covered. So why the agent is fighting tooth and nail for it, it's not like they're not going to get it. I mean, unless they've worked out something crazy with the buyer to say, if I don't work it out and get it in there, we're going to reduce it. I mean, if they've done that, that's their own fault, right? Because I can't tell you if people are doing that. I have not heard that, but it doesn't matter. So I want you all, I'd be happy to text this to anybody who needs this screenshot.
Can we email it to everybody so everybody can have it?
I would happy
And
to email it to
also,
anybody.
I would absolutely
Yeah.
email it back as an image, not just an attachment. I would email it back.
Well, most of these conversations are text messages. That's why I'm saying. So I'll email it to you. I'll text it to you, whatever you need. But guys, most importantly, you need to know the code of ethics are on your side. There is no code of ethic anymore covering compensation to protect the buy side. The code of ethics now that is protecting the sell side. Okay, so this is the point. They cannot ask what is in our listing agreement. It is none of their business. When you write up a listing agreement, and we're going to share that part of the screen, I want you to see it really quickly because this is very important. We all understand this. And I still think there's still some confusion about this. So I really want us to all be extremely clear about this. Let's go here. Hold on a second. Can you all see my screen? And we can all see exclusive or to sell listing agreement? Everybody see that online? Can somebody unmute and tell me, yes, I see it?
Yes, we see it.
Thank you, Miss
Yeah.
Chu.
Yep.
Okay, so if we check an 8, let's say we said 6 here, right? And then we checked 10A, 3. Let's just say we did that. This 3 here is completely negotiable. But this here is not, okay? We don't have to call
Right.
out the percentage here. We know it's 3 because we all can do good math. But if this goes down, and I've been asked this question many times, if let's say in Chad's case, let's pretend it was 3 and they came in with an offer of 375,000 less, they went down to 1, let's just say. We don't have to change this side. On our CCC, this is still going to remain 3. We don't have to modify the listing agreement in any way, shape, or form to show that this is going to be 1. The contract will do the modification on that. The contract between buyer and seller is the modification on what this part will be. Does everybody follow me? Okay? Unless we're on both sides, we don't need to worry about any modification on that. I get that question a lot. Carrie, do we need to modify the listing agreement because this number is changing? The answer to that is no. This is completely negotiable. And it is between who? The buyer and the seller, right? Now, we will be paying it from our commission side, right? But it's negotiable between the buyer and the seller. Are we party to the contract? No, we are not. Although these agents seem to think they are now. It's very funny. So that's the thing. Are we clear on that? If you have a customer who says, I don't want to offer commission, I want to wait and see what happens, then you write in our example as above 3% here and you check C here. Everybody good with that? I do not see a reason again to ever check B because B still makes absolutely no sense to me. That means that
Play devil's advocate on that.
on the B, you can.
So the devil's advocate on it is that the other perspective from Florida Realtors faculty that they were showing us is that now it gets us out of the way of being the middleman, and now they can't be mad at us because it's not asking us for a portion of the compensation. They're negotiating directly with the seller. So that's what they're
Still
perspective
negotiating
is.
with the seller and the
Yes,
buyer.
but if in A, we're still involved and they can be mad at us, why aren't you making sure that I'm getting? Hey, I've got nothing to do with it. If I'm not the middleman anymore, because there's no MLS. So now it's just simply, it's B. And if, this is what the seller is offering you, well, I want more. Put it in the offer and we'll see what the seller says.
We're still
So-
doing that on A though. Yeah.
But that's the,
I'm not a lover of B. I'm just not a lover of B.
I'm an absolute lover of B, but that's okay. I will do what I'm told.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just not a lover of B personally. But again, I personally see B as you've started with C, the seller decides to take it, and now it's B. But we're not changing the listing agreement. But if I'm in the listing agreement and his seller says, well, I'm going to offer it, but I don't want you to handle it, it's a little wonky, I think. Because how's that going to look on the CCC too? I don't know. It's a little wonky. But anyway, that's what that is. Now let's talk about the new doc. First, actually, let's go back one more second before we do. And I want to look at the 2 forms that are still unfortunately relevant, which are the buyer broker, let me see, compensation agreement, sellers, broker to buyer's broker, and seller to buyer's broker. So what Juliana was saying is sellers to buyer's broker. What I'm saying is sellers broker to buyer's broker. The other thing is if you do seller to buyer's broker, the seller has to sign that, which a lot of people don't like. This is seller's broker to buyer's broker. This is something that you could pass off to the agent who's asked you, are they offering compensation? Again, you can put in the percentage that they're offering, and then you can say compensation referenced above is contingent upon submission of an executed broker buyer agreement in 5 days, blah, blah, blah. That's what's in there. But I would say that it's contingent upon a full price offer. I would be adding that in,
Right.
right? Now you could either hand this over not signed, or you could sign it. But my suggestion, guys, is to write in here is contingent upon a full price offer, right? Because it is all negotiable. And it says it everywhere all over this. But this, people seem to think if they have one of these, they're guaranteed that money. They're not guaranteed anything till closing. Because even when you get in an agreement, inspection comes back, there's issues, they can renegotiate that. All of this stuff is negotiable because they're not renegotiating the buyer broker compensation. That buyer broker compensation is secured by what? The buyer broker's representation agreement between the buyer and their customer, which is the buyer themselves, right? So that's what's securing the buyer broker compensation. So the seller covering what percentage of that is really just, again, what part is the buyer coming to the table with and what part are they having covered by the seller? You follow me? So if they're saying to the seller, I want you to cover a new AC, I want you to cover new flooring, and the seller says, fine, I'll cover some of those things, but now I'm not paying more for your realtor, right? It's still a part of the negotiation. So you could have this signed all day long. It can still change. That is the part. And I'm going to tell you, if you change it, I guarantee you're going to have agents who say, that's a code of ethics violation. No, it is not. You are not party to the contract. The contract is between buyers and sellers. The net is going to be the same, and the agent is going to be getting whole at the end just by a different party. Does that make sense? So I feel like that's where the confusion is coming from. They feel like they're not going to get paid because back in the day, before all the changes, if the seller changed the compensation, the buyer's agent didn't get paid, right? Now they do. I think that's where the confusion is coming from, old ways, right? But in the new world that we're in, they're all going to get paid just by the buyer. That's the difference.
I think is that a lot of people are just not getting that agreement, and that's what's happening.
Well, if they're not, they're in violation and they can't get
Yeah.
paid.
Yeah.
If you don't have that agreement, you can't get paid anyway.
But
Because guess what?
but they're not showing anything, so I'm
Well,
thinking
that's
they're
what's
not-
going to happen. Title companies are going to start requesting it.
Mhm.
And if they don't have it, they're going to not be able to get paid.
Because why would they be fighting for commission if they already have an agreement? That's the only thing I can. think of.
Excellent question. And I'm going to tell you, being on the Broker Advisory Council for MLS, I have put in that I think we should require the software that you have to put in your broker buyer agreement as soon as you have it. So that was my suggestion, and they're bringing it to the board. I think that we need to have that. Because not only for the accountability, but for the advisors to know if one buyer is working with 5 other buyers, like you need to have a buyer's agent. You need to have that understanding, right? So it's good for a multitude of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
We aren't violating something.
Yeah.
By, if we pay them 3 and they were only allowed to get 2.5 and they had no modification.
Well,
permission from.
remember, that is the violation falls on the
The buyer.
buyer's agent who
Agreed.
takes it, but
Right.
But
We
I
wanna make
agree.
Sure that we aren't in that
Yeah.
fray. So I think what your suggestion is great.
oh, I agree. That's why I said that. I'm all for it. Yes, Shane.
So I know some EXP agents and their brokerage is telling their agents not to use the Form A, the seller's broker to buyer broker, only seller to buyer broker.
That's a choice. It really doesn't matter. But let's say we have selected 10A. Guess what? You're not going to get that one from us. So I guess you'll never get that agreement.
So A is just, it's been predetermined at the listing that
Yeah.
it's going to be offered. I thought B was, it's negotiable, and then C was, we're not
Nope,
offering
they're
anything.
all negotiable. A, B, and C are all negotiable because of the lawsuit. That's the whole point. It has always been negotiable, but now it's really, because beforehand, we had the code of ethics saying if we offered 2.5%, whatever it was protected that you had to do that. Now, nothing is protected. It is all negotiable till the end of closing, period.
But if
Not
it's
the
all
listing,
negotiable, why are there multiple forms? I don't understand the two forms.
because it depends on, let me share the screen again. Let me go through this for you. Seller's broker to buyer's broker. That means we, as the seller's broker, the listing broker, we are collecting the fees for you. We're handling the correspondence for that. We're handling paying it out. That's just simply like we used to do. It's still the seller paying it. It's just that we're going the extra mile and being the 100%, customer service that we normally are. That's what we do, white glove service. If you are doing seller to buyer's broker, let me show you that form. Compensation agreement. I put it at the bottom because I don't like it. But it's in there. Seller to buyer's broker. This is saying that the seller will agree to pay the buyer's broker. So we're not going to be handling it. It's the seller who's going to do it. On the HUD, it's the same thing, but that's not really full service, is it? It's like,
Yeah, because it comes out of the same proceeds. I still don't
same
get it, but,
proceeds, but it's really more the seller. So it's really not a full service. It's like less than full service. That's why I don't like it as much either. But the same thing, either way, the seller's paying it, right? It's just that now it's not being
Right.
handled by our brokerage. We're like, sorry, we're not handling that for you. We're not full service anymore. We're like partial full service. So that's kind of what that's saying. So the seller to buyer's broker, okay? But it's the same thing. On the HUD, it's still coming from the sell side. The HUD is going to look the
Right.
same. Got it? And you do the same thing on this. You would say, let's say 3% based upon a full price offer. So that thing is the same, but the difference is the seller signing it. We're not signing it. We have nothing to do with it. Sorry, Mr. Seller, it's on you. We're not handling that for you. We're just going to give it to you and you got to deal with it. So you see, we're not really being full service, are we? So that's probably why EXP is doing it. Because they probably see less liability for themselves and they're not a full service company anyway. Sorry. Now, what they have introduced, let me share this with you. So this one is related to the last one. FF is credit related to buyer's broker compensation. So let's say you receive in your offer where they're wanting to have the buyer saying, like we have in there, buyer is requesting that seller pay a percentage towards the buyer broker's compensation at closing. That's what this is about. So this is saying the buyer has entered into a separate brokerage agreement, which we know. That can be amended, the buyer broker agreement, but it's not incorporated in. So you put the brokerage that it is. So they can amend their agreement, but it's not incorporated. We don't get to see it. They're not adding it into our contract. Okay. So we know they have their own separate agreement that they can change, right? That's what that's saying. At closing, the seller agrees to credit the buyer the sum described below, which for disclosure purposes, only the parties agree is related to the buyer's obligation under the buyer broker agreement to pay all or a portion of the buyer broker compensation. So we're giving it to the buyer, and the buyer, we understand, is going to use it to pay all or part of the buyer broker agreement. So basically, we're not going to pay to the buyer's broker. We're going to give it to the buyer and assume that the buyer is going to pay their buyer brokerage agreement with that. Okay. And then we say what percentage. So like if they said the buyer's broker is going to pay, they're asking for 2%, 3%, whatever, that's where we put the percentage.
Notice that right above where it says broker commissions are not set, that paragraph right there is important.
Where are you?
This right above. where
Oh,
it
we're
says
not there yet. So in the event the
That's-
credit described above, this is important, exceeds the amount allowed by the buyer's lender for such contributions, then the extent permitted by the buyer's lender, you have to pick which one here, then the balance will be credited by the seller, either directly to the buyer broker, or it will go to the buyer's lender. Interesting, right? So the credit will be reduced to the maximum amount. So you either say, okay, we're going to give 2.5%, but the buyer's lender says you can only get 2%. We're either going to reduce it to 2%, which is this one, or we're going to give the remaining, let's say they can only get 2%. We have an extra 0.5%. The seller will give the other 0.5% direct to the buyer broker. So this is the weird one, because let's say it's an FHA or something and they're like close to the amount you can give, you would have to probably want to select this one. And it does say if left blank, then the balance of the credit will be paid by the seller directly to the buyer broker. So they're going to automatically choose that one, assuming that the whole point of this was to pay the buyer broker. That's the whole point of that. But I mean, otherwise they're going to reduce it and then the seller gets the money back, right? That's what this is about. If you did this one, if you couldn't use the other 0.5%, guess what? The seller gets that money back. So if it's a savvy seller, he might go, I want that one.
Right.
And if the buyer is not super savvy, they might not know, right? And if the agent is brand new, he might not know. So you guys got to understand this, right? In the event the credit described above exceeds the limit allowed by the buyer broker agreement, as you were saying, the credit will be adjusted to the amount allowed by the buyer broker agreement. Now, here's the question. How do we know? How do we know? Rider FF shall not modify the buyer broker agreement or any other compensation agreement made by the seller, buyer, seller broker, and or buyer broker. Nothing in this rider requires the buyer or the buyer broker to provide a copy of the buyer broker agreement to the seller. So you can't require them to give it to you. So we don't know, this is what's terrible. We don't know what's in the buyer broker agreement. So at some point, and I know because Joanna Watkins said, there will be a document that will be requiring some form of either the actual buyer broker agreement or some kind of a abridged part of the buyer broker agreement to be handed to title.
Yeah, because some
Hey,
of the stuff.
Carrie,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Couldn't
What?
we put this, is it me or you ask somebody else to say something?
You, my love.
Okay, so couldn't we request that on the actual contract? Couldn't we put this in writing? Could we do an addendum? Is there any way that we can actually do that?
For the buyer broker agreement,
Hmm.
we're not really allowed to ask for it. I mean, we can ask for it, but they don't have to give it to us. Let's put it that way. We can ask for it all day long. They just don't have to give it to us. It's like, we are not going to give our listing agreement to anyone. So we can ask for the buyer broker agreement, but they do not have to give it to us. But at some point, they're going to have to give some form of it to title. But because we as the listing agents are not held liable if it's paid too much, then that's why it's really gray whether or not they have to give it to us. They don't have to give it to us. That's why. And then it says broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. I think all these agents need to read that one, right? So you see this one, but this one has nothing to do with the buyer broker. Notice this has to do when the buyer is asking in the contract for a certain amount of that compensation, a buyer credit to go towards their buyer broker. Everybody with me? You understand when you'd use this?
No, sorry.
So
I do
if
not.
in the contract you use, let me go back. No, don't save changes. You remember we have here clauses. And we have offers contingent upon the seller paying blank percentage of the final purchase price as compensation to the buyer broker at closing. Remember that?
Yes,
If you use that, that's when that addendum would apply. Because the buyer is asking for a percentage of the purchase price, 2%, 3%, whatever it is, to go towards their buyer broker at closing. So that's why that addendum now applies. You don't have to add any other addendum. You would now add that addendum right here because this is the one that's asking the same thing. You see, you would now instead incorporate this. You would now, this is not under additional terms yet, which they're going to be adding under additional terms in the as is and in the standard FAR bar. So you're going to have to say under other check FF credit related to buyer's broker compensation. And you would now just attach this. And now this is a request. You don't actually even have to add that verbiage because this is the verbiage you're asking for. the buyer is requesting 2% of the purchase price to go to their buyer broker at closing. You see?
Okay, thank
Kelly,
you.
This
would
replaces
this,
that. Mhm.
yeah, sorry,
Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, would this only be used then if it's a financing transaction and not in a cash, it obviously wouldn't be
No.
needed in a cash transaction?
It would be great in cash too, because then it doesn't matter about financing, right? Because you're still asking for 2-3% to go to the purchase price, but this part is really not applicable. So here you can say the balance would go towards the seller directly, but you don't have to worry about that because there is no lender limit, right? But this is simply where they're asking. Now, this is really more though, if you were just putting it in there that the buyer is requesting it. Let's say you weren't having the buyer requesting it because you knew that the seller was already offering that compensation, right? Like in Chad's case, the seller is offering 2.5%. So the buyer was not going to ask for it because he was already giving it, right? Let's say you weren't going to use this one. That's when you can use this GG and not hold up a deal because you're going back and forth splitting hairs over that compensation. Because the point is, as we've said a billion times, you have a buyer broker agreement. You know how much you're getting paid, right? The buyer doesn't want to hold up a deal because you're going back and forth on that compensation that the seller was willing to pay, right? They just want to get the deal. So this is why you use this seller's agreement with respect to buyer's broker compensation. This contract is contingent upon either the seller's broker to buyer's broker or seller to buyer's broker. So this is whether you chose 10A or 10B. Executing a compensation agreement with the terms acceptable to the buyer, not to the buyer's agent, guys. That's nothing to do with the buyer's agent. They're not even privy to the contract. Within, if left blank, 3 days after the effective date, because we're not supposed to be impeding a sale, quibbling over our damn commission, right? And that's what's happening. And then it says, if the compensation agreement described herein is not executed and delivered within the time period, the buyer may, the buyer, not the buyer's agent, within the 3 days, deliver written notice to the seller terminating the contract and getting their deposit refunded to the buyer, releasing buyer and seller from further obligations from the contract. But if they fail to deliver written notice within that time, then they have to move forward, right? Otherwise, they lose the deposit. Broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. The whole point of this one, guys, is because of exactly what's happened with Chad and what is exactly what's happened with Janet. People are quibbling over their compensation, which has no bearing on the buyer. Instead, what it is doing is impeding a sale, not in the benefit of the buyer, but in the benefit, not even in the benefit, but in the really putting the agent first. Am I right?
Right.
This is the problem. That's why they came up with that. Because who should be deciding how it's being paid? The agent? No, the buyer. Because who's the one responsible for paying the commission? The buyer. So the whole point of that one is to say, listen, I'm the buyer. I want to put my offer in, damn it. And I'm going to decide how I'm going to pay the commission. Am I going to pay it all at closing? Am I going to pay some in the close with the seller? Well, how's that balance going to look? I'm going to have 3 days to decide that. You agent, get out of my way. That's the point of that addenda. Agent, get out of the way because you are impeding a sale and causing problems. It's really sad, guys, when the Florida Realtors Bar Association has to get together to create an addenda to say, get out of the way, you're impeding a sale. But that is what that addenda is. But it's great because that's what's happening. Oh, well, I think that the listing agent should have done it, really, to be honest. In Janet's case and in Chad's case, I think you guys should have sent it. But really, the buyer could have done it. Because if you're a good agent and you know that, you're back and forth and you might not have had that figured out, you could have submitted that with the offer before you had the compensation agreement finalized. Yes.
Wasn't this referenced in Budge's, the classes that he made us take, where he said he wanted to make sure that we had a compensation agreement ready so that we can immediately send it when requested.
Well,
So
we
it didn't
have
reference
that.
to that.
No, we have the
That's right.
compensation, seller broker to buyer broker. That's what he referenced, which we have. That's already been done and ready. What this is because we've had those and there's so much confusion by the wonderful agents on the other side. I had another word, wasn't quite wonderful.
Incompetent, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a good one. I didn't say it, but you said it. But the agents on the other side who are obviously confused about thinking that they're not going to get paid unless they put their buyer aside and work their commission first. You see, that's what's happening. They're trying to put their buyer aside. Now, what if right now we were in a hot seller's market and their buyers were missing out on deals? Right? That could be happening, guys. This is the problem. If you ask me, that's a violation of Article 1 and Article 16, what they're doing. Right there.
It's also Article 3.
And Article 3, yes. They're
Not in the best interest of their seller.
yes, absolutely. But most of these people are not representing the sellers. But it's really more, in my opinion, Article 1, because they're putting the customers, their own interest in both the customer, and Article 16 for sure, because they're trying to renegotiate our listing agreements for us. This is really freaking annoying. But my point is, we need to help them understand through the use of these addendas that it's not about them. They will get paid because they have a broker buyer agreement. And if they don't have a broker buyer agreement, they're already in violation and they shouldn't get paid anyway, right? So the whole point is you cannot fight what has happened. We are in a new world. Embrace it. This is a beautiful thing. If you have a 3% buyer broker agreement, how much are you getting paid? 3%. That was not a tricky question. So does it matter what is negotiated into that contract, guys? No, that was not a tricky question either. It doesn't matter, right? That's the whole point. So again, let's put our own self aside. Your time when you're a buyer's agent to do your negotiation is on the front. It's in the buyer broker agreement. Then your work is for the buyer to get them the best deal and help them to strategize how they want to work the offer. Not you. You're not trying to get for yourself. You already did that work when you got your buyer broker agreement. This is what I don't understand. And stop worrying about what's in our listing agreements, right? What is wrong with these people? So, do I have any questions from the floor? It's very
Well, Terry,
frustrating.
I still think it's still relevant because, I mean, if we know that the buyer can't close on the house, you know, based on 3% buyer broker and the seller's not willing to pay, then, I mean, it is relevant. It'll kill the deal.
Well, that's true, Shane. That is true. If you wrote a 3% buyer broker agreement, knowing that they really can't get 3%, that's true. But then you should be using this one, Shane. You have to use that one. Follow me? You got to put it in the offer.
So, I mean, that should, I mean, it seems like that would just trump everything,
Yeah,
all the other
I
forms,
agree.
right? Just use this
I
one
agree.
instead.
Just use this one. Yeah. Because, I mean, unless you're dealing with a seller with a lot of cash who says, I want to decide how I want to use my money, right? Because they may not want to put it in the offer. Maybe they don't want to. This is a buyer who wants to put it in the offer, right?
For
That's
the
what this is.
first time home buyer.
You have to use this one. I mean, why would you not, right? Absolutely. But you need to talk to their lender too and talk to them about how much can they. Now, most lenders, again, are okay because they've separated the closing costs and the compensation, remember, but you still need to have that conversation, guys, for sure. Yes. Jane, did you have more question? Whose question? Mike?
Yes, so instead of the compensation agreement, from here on out, we use the FF.
We can't say that as a blanket statement, although that was very cute of you to try. If you are dealing with the certain type of buyer who does not have the 3% to pay your commission, yes, definitely use FF. You need to put that in the offer. Because if it's not
Okay.
accepted, they can't close, right? Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Okay.
But if you're dealing with somebody who has an $8 million purchase power, no, you don't necessarily need to use FF, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mark Shamley.
Question about compensation in regards to if it's a full price offer. Is
Mhm.
that something that needs to be put in the listing agreement in regards to like the seller says they'll give that amount?
Nope. Nope.
How does that work? Are we allowed to do that? Because I've been hearing that. I didn't know that was allowed.
It's totally allowed. All commissions are negotiable. All commissions, not ours, not the list. Remember, when you go to a listing agreement and you share with them our professional fee, that is decided upon. It's negotiable at the time of the listing agreement. That's when you negotiate that. But the buy side commission, that has not been negotiated because you're not in contract yet, right? So we go in contract on our listing agreement at the time of the appointment. So that has been negotiated firm. But you have not negotiated the offer because you don't know who the buyer is, right? So that is negotiable until you're in contract. Does that make sense? And really until it closes, because as we both know, things come up during inspection, things come up during appraisal. So sometimes things get renegotiated. So that's what happens. Not in the listing agreement though, as we all know. So that's the difference, but you do not need to write that into the listing agreement. No. Felix,
Okay.
Can you hear me?
now I can.
Awesome. Hey, I think these agents are having a difficult time with that because they're telling their buyers right away that, oh, I'm gonna get the seller to pay that automatically. I saw a video on Instagram that literally the agents were saying that right away. We won't submit an offer without the seller's paying for it, like on video. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, very good. That's a very good point, Felix. That might be the problem. Yeah, that is a violation. That's like saying I work for free. You don't have to pay me. That's a violation. That's a huge violation. Listen, then they should all be using FF. Yes.
Carrie, remember with that whole seller's broker to buyer's broker's agreement and the other broker not signing that arbitration portion. So how do we handle that going forward? I mean,
so this is what the arbitration clause says, and we have the same problem in our listing agreements. Oftentimes it gets missed, not that they actually mean to not sign it. When you have an arbitration clause, guys, that simply means that if there is a problem that cannot be solved through discussion, through any kind of regular talk, then we would take it to arbitration. If you don't sign that, that means they don't agree to that. That means it would go to litigation. That's all that means. Listen, they want to take it to litigation, bring it. That's what I said. So in general, we would prefer to have it signed to go to arbitration because it's a lot less costly for sure, number one. But, listen, if they want to try to sue Sotheby's, go right ahead. We have attorneys. I mean, but I honestly don't think that we're going to ever withhold commission when it's commission due. So that whole thing was just plain old stupid, Janet. I mean, there was no other better word than that. I don't even think he probably knows what the arbitration clause is for, to be honest. Yeah. It was really to protect him too. So that we went to great lengths to add the arbitration in there. That's the ridiculousness of it all. So whatever, fine. But thank you. Great question.
A lot of that is they're getting advice from attorneys who are friends and family that are not real estate attorneys. So they pick something out to look like they earned a penny or that they were useful, and they don't even understand the point of it because it's not their general practice.
Yeah, no, this kid was not even that smart. But yeah, but in general, other people do that. Yeah, this kid was just not even that smart. But yes, good point. Anybody else have any other questions? So Monday, we are going to do G&E download 2. We have some of the folks that did not make the first panel on our second panel. I'm going to go dive into the new video design vault, which is amazing, and some other new tools and resources that we have. You're going to love it. And what else did I want to share with you? Something else that I just went totally blank. Oh yeah, you have to vote for me. Everybody vote for me next week for the board of directors. Yes, I know I'm running again. But I think it's important that I stay involved. So I'm going to send out a link at Aura. Or they appoint me in Florida. I get appointed. I don't have to actually run for that. But You can't vote for me. Well, if you're Aura, then vote for me. Yeah, come to the dark side. We have cookies. That's right. But if anybody else has questions for me, let me know. And I will look forward to seeing you all bright and shiny on Monday. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you. Bye.